So I posted a video the other day with a kind of polarizing opinion on the rod changes being good. That got a lot of pushback, very expected and understandable, but I wanted to kind of explain my point of view here and kind of go over some changes that I think would be fair to make to rod, because despite my stance, I agree with a majority of what people were saying is that the nerf was too much. I do agree. I don't think things like this should not exist. But my primary point is I just don't think that these should be used as a band-aid solution to problems, and they shouldn't be used as a scapegoat to trying your hardest, essentially. Let me just start off by saying that I think the one-shot mechanics values are fine. The damage values for like the percent damage value just kind of needs to go for regular damage. I think it should just be a static damage value like it was in the initial change. Maybe a little bit harder or maybe a little bit more damage. I don't know. And then animate dead and defensives just should not work with it. So defensives, of course, and then animate dead just gives a style advantage to magic with rod that the other two styles don't have. So in and of itself is unbalanced. So those things I agree with. I'll go in more in depth with that, but I want to explain my stance on my previous video first. If you want to check that out, you can check that out. But otherwise, I'm just going to get right into it. The points I'm going over are not necessarily the loudest opinions, but they're the ones that kind of speak to my overall stance the most. I've seen the arguments that say magic is busted, but only rod was changed and magic is still busted. So that I think is kind of like a little bit of a straw man argument, because magic is a whole entire combat style. It's 1/3 of the way that you do combat in RuneScape. You can either do melee, range, or magic. And there's a whole bunch of details that go with magic. The changes to rod is something that the game functioned just fine with before those changes. Very different fix, very different problem to fix. Kind of piggybacking off that, I think people will use an item or a combat style as a reason for why they feel like they can't do certain content. I've actually done a whole series on progressing with melee, a whole series on progressing with range, and now I'm currently doing a series where I'm progressing with magic. Is magic strong? 100%. But is melee not able to do content that everybody says it can't do? That is absolutely incorrect. I have done 100% Sammy with it, very scuffed, but I've done it. I've learned hard mode care pack with it. I learned how to do like a majority of the content that I do today. I learned how to do with melee first. I didn't need the current effects of rod to do that. I didn't need a certain item to do that. I needed to spend time doing those things to do that. So people put too much value in items or combat styles as opposed to putting value into the amount of time that they actually spend at those bosses or encounters or the things that they want to get good at. That was kind of like my last point, but I mean, that's pretty much that point. You don't need a certain item or combat style to do content. You just need to spend time doing it. That's pretty much the cut and dry of it. And I think people limit themselves a lot in that aspect. With that, moving on to my next couple points, rod isn't a solution to things that are wonky with the combat system, like dead clicks, multiple keybinds going off when you have a modifier like Alt, Control, or Shift on a specific keybind. The tick system is slower than it is in other games. It's 0.6 seconds, where like other games will be like even like much less than that. Rod shouldn't be the band-aid solution to these things. Fixing these, like addressing these problems should be the solution to those problems, like directly fixing those problems. When you just kind of ignore problems and just develop with the problems ignored, those problems are going to resurface in the future. That is how it is with just everything in any type of work, any type of thing in life. That's how it is with relationships. That's how it is in gaming. So ignoring solutions and ignoring problems is never a good thing. Not saying we haven't done that like up to this point, but that doesn't mean we should continue to keep ignoring problems. We should start fixing them and just, start making right. Maybe a little idealistic, but that's my stance on that. So moving into like my last point on my stance is I think people underappreciate the value of multiple lives. To kind of give a timeline, it started off where like you died, you lost all your stuff, it dropped to the ground and people could pick it up. And then it became gravestones where people could bless it and then it could last for a certain amount of time. If the gravestone went away, people could pick up your stuff. And then it went to just gravestones in general. And then I think it somehow evolved into death cost to where like we don't have like gravestones reduce the cost of like what you pay to get your stuff back. After multiple releases, death costs became absurdly high. So now we have what we have today, reduced death costs and the Ring of Death changes. So in that time, we've also gotten Divination, which brought an item called the Sign of Life, which allowed you to take lethal damage and still continue your encounter. And this would go on a 1-hour cooldown. And now you essentially just incorporated a second life into your pocket slot item or your inventory as a switch. Then when they reworked skill capes, it became a passive of the skill cape of defense. You could just wear the skill cape of defense, or you could put it into your max cape. And if you died, the Sign of Life effect would proc, and you would be saving on an inventory slot and a pocket slot item. Then they updated the passive cape perk to be with all capes because they reworked how people not being able to use best in slot capes because of XYZ, or they needed to comp in order to have the best in slot cape. So they changed the passive effects to just go to all capes. So you essentially always have the Sign of Life effect no matter what you're wearing if you have 99 defense and you've slotted that cape either into your Anachronia cape stand or your max cape. That is a huge passive buff in and of itself. Rod on top of that, saving you from lethal damage, is a huge buff in and of itself, even in its current state, despite what people say, because the game functioned just fine without this change. I think people just underappreciate the value of multiple lives during a kill. It doesn't need to be the best scenario. The benefit is like taking a one shot and not dying is a benefit. All right, so let's move on to the proposed changes. Just kind of regurgitating what I said before. The one-shot mechanics I think are fair. If something prevented you from being sent to death's office, then it gives you just a couple seconds more time to react and teleport out or finish your kill. That is very fair. That kind of just ties into why I think like people underappreciate the value of multiple lives. This shouldn't be something that you see as a free heal, and this shouldn't be something that's just like, okay, cool, I got myself like another 2 to 3 minutes to finish up this boss. It should be something that like, okay, I have like another 5 to 10 seconds to finish what I was doing, and if I don't, I'll teleport out. I know that people say like, well, that doesn't apply to Telos or Archglacior. Those are built-in difficulty functionalities, and everybody has known that since the beginning of their release, so I don't really think that's a good point. The other thing is, I don't think that there should be damage mitigation at all. I don't think that really needs an explanation. 100% shouldn't work with Animate Dead. Definitely shouldn't work with defensives. It's something that is offering you a second life. Now on that point though, I don't think there needs to be percentage values as the starting bleed damage for something that is not considered a one-shot mechanic or an insta-kill mechanic. If it's something that's just like you got hit for like 1,000 damage, I think it should just be a static amount. Like 20% of 1,000 is 200 damage. That's a manageable amount. But I mean, if you take if it's an auto attack, or like, I know High Enraged Zammy has very high hitting auto attacks, but at the same time, it's just an auto attack. It's just a normal mechanic. I don't think that should have a percentage value. I think it should still just have like a starting point of maybe a little bit higher than the previous rod, but like 300, 350, whatever. Because even at High Enraged Zammy, if you get smacked with an 8k auto attack and it procs your Sign of Life and you have a 350 bleed that progressively gets harder and harder to deal with, that's still going to be a lot to manage with the amount that those auto attacks are hitting. So I think that's fair to revert those percentage changes, but the one-shot values I think are totally fine. The other thing that I saw on Twitter is from Pup. He basically said that Sign of Life exists, so it kind of makes the effects a little bit redundant. I could be misquoting that, I could be misunderstanding that, but the solution is that when it's worn, when you sign, you will keep 100% adrenaline, heal to full, which Rod does, and then for 10 seconds you will take 20% less damage. And that is like a fusion of the two items. That makes Sign of Life not have like that annoying thing where it delays you and it only heals you like 25% or whatever, which, you know, if your if your Rod procs, it'll probably just nuke you anyway and get rid of the Sign of Life. But it kind of fuses the two together, and that would happen once per hour. So Sign of Life could have its current effect, and then if you have Rod, it could boost the effect. But when you don't have Rod, it would have its current effect, or if you just have Rod with the Sign of Life on cooldown, it would have a lesser effect, like what I imagine would be its current state with the proposed changes that I just mentioned previously. So that's pretty much it. I don't think it needs a lot of tweaking. I just think it needs to not have mitigatable damage through other means, and I think the percentage needs to just not apply to normal mechanics that aren't considered one shot. So let me know what you think. If you still disagree or whatever, that is totally fine. I definitely see where everybody is coming from, and I don't think that, despite what I was saying earlier about like people need to spend time to just do certain things, I do understand that people have different life situations. Some people have kids, they're married, they have certain obligations that they can't devote as much time to someone who is able to devote hours per day. I do understand that, and I do understand that there's like physical ailments and other things that make it harder for certain people to play than other people. So I don't think things like this should not exist. But my primary point is I just don't think that these should be used as a band-aid solution to problems, and they shouldn't be used as a scapegoat to trying your hardest, essentially. So anyways, I'm babbling on. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.